Hey there, I'm your host Zoe, and in today's video I'll show you how to create an inspect system similar to Skyrim. Behind me we can see 3 objects, and if I get close to one and press Q, this is what we get. We can now rotate this with our mouse, with our keys if we wish to. We can also press the middle mouse to zoom in, and we can use our wheel to zoom out if we wish. Let's close that, go to our mushroom next. So we could do this with any item we wish. We can also access this from our inventory if we had one, just like so. And with that said, let's begin. We will start with creating our own custom trace channel to interact with our items. And for that, we'll go to settings, to project settings. And if we search for trace, we'll get a trace channels option. And let's create a new trace channel. For this, I'll call it interactive, and we'll make it ignore as the default response. Hit accept and exit. Next, let's go to our content drawer and right click to create a folder, and we can call this our interaction folder. And in here, we want to right click once again, go to blueprints, and let's create a blueprint interface. And we'll call it BPI Interaction. So this will allow us to interact with our items. For the first function, let's call it our interact with. You can leave this blank if you wish, but I'll add a input, and this is for your player character. So this is very handy. Let's say you had an inventory system. It's very easy to access it then. And we'll cast to our third person character, object reference. Next function we want is the lookat function. So this function will output the message of the item that we're looking at. So let's say if it's a door, it would say open door. If it's an item, it could say pick up item. So in the outputs, we'll do a message, and this will be of type text. And the last one we're interested in is our inspect. So let's do inspect. And for this, we're going to need a structure. So let's go into our content drawer, create a new folder for our inspect. And in here, we'll create a structure. So go to blueprints, structure, and we'll call it s_inspect info. Okay. And in here, we need a few things. We want to know the mesh we're inspecting. So let's call the item inspect, or let's do item mesh. And this will be of type static mesh, object reference. Next, we want to know the materials. So we'll do item materials, and this will be of type material interface. So material interface, there we go. And we want this to be an array because perhaps your item has multiple materials. So just change this to an array. If it's one, it's fine. We then want to know about the item name, the item description. We also would like to know about the item weight, and you can add here as many as you wish, and the item value. So for the other ones, for the item name, this will be a text, same with the description, and let's change these to single. Item weight will be a float, and the item value can be a float or an integer. All right, so with this complete, we'll save this, and we can go back to our interface, and in here, we want to add an input of our inspect info, and the type will be our s_inspect info, just like that. And we don't need any outputs. So let's compile and save. And with this done, it would be a good idea to add some UI to see if we get close to an item, to say pick up or whatever. So if we go to our interaction folder, we can right click once again and create a UI folder. And in here, I'll create a widget, and let's call it our WB_interact message. Okay, so in here, we want a canvas panel. And on top of that, we want to add a border. And if you hold Control and Shift and anchor it to the bottom, it should do it for you with the alignments. For the size Y, we'll do 70. For size X, let's do 400. And position Y, we'll do like -120 offset. Cool. Then for the color itself, I'll grab like a nice darker color like this maybe. And let's also grab ourselves a text. Now to make this a little bit more interesting, what we can do is if we go to our content drawer again. Right click to create a new folder. Let's call it MUI or materials UI. In here, we'll create a material and let's call it our M_double gradient. In here, we will select our material and change the material domain from surface to user interface and the blend mode from opaque to translucent. Then what you want to do is we want to grab a linear gradient like so. And from here, we'll do a -1 like so. And then we can do a multiply node. So connect this into A and this into B. And this is the result we're getting, but still this isn't what we kind of want. So we'll grab another multiply this by a higher value, something like 4. And with this, now this is what we want. So let's also do a clamp at the end. So clamps between the minimum and the maximum value and connect it. Apply that, save. And if we go back to our widget in the brush, so color and opacity, nope. Let's select border. And in brush, we should be able to add our double gradient like so. Then for the text itself, we can do 0 on the padding, center align it. For the font size, I'll do something like 16 to compensate for any larger text. Let's do pick up item. And then for the text, we want this to be variable txt_item, or better yet, interact message. Okay, so that's our pickup UI done. So let's go to the graph. And in here, we are interested in the pre-construct. Let's get our text and do a set message or set text rather. Connect that in there. And from this, we'll promote this to a variable. Let's call it the interact message like so. And we'll do is empty. Now, if it is empty, we'll do set visibility. And from here, we'll do a select node like so. So if it is visible, so it will be on false because it's asking if it's empty. So if it's visible, we want this to be visible, but not hit testable. So not hit testable, self and all children. And for true, we'll just make it collapsed. So if we don't see anything, we really don't see anything. With that, we'll do a custom event, and this will be our set message. So this will set our message and then run this code to see if something's there. So we'll grab this, set it, plug this value into there, and then this will go into set text again. So with this done, we can compile and save. And next, let's go ahead and create our component for the interaction. So let's go to our content drawer and to our interaction folder, right click, go to blueprint class and select your actor component. With this, we'll call it BPC_interaction. Let's go inside. And in here, the first thing we want to do is create a function called create interact message. From here, we'll do a create widget like so. And let's call it our interact message. We'll add this to a, well, let's promote it to a variable first. WB_interact message. And then at the very end, we'll add it to our viewport. Okay, so let's compile that and save. Let's also create our interaction trace. So in here, we'll do a capsule trace. So I'll just call it capsule trace. And for this, we'll need a sphere trace by channel, like so. For the start position, we'll get the owner. So this is referring to our player there. We'll get the actor's location. We'll get the actor forward vector. And we want to multiply this by a float value. So right click on this bottom pin here and either change it to a single float or a double float. Doesn't really matter. Double precision float. So in here, I'll do something like 150. So 150 units from the starting location. And we'll add this to this. So our start location is the starting location of our player, and the end location is our start location plus 150 units. or 150 units away from the start location. And then for the trace channel, we want to select our own interactive. Now let's say you don't see this, recompile, and then it should come up for you. For the radius, we'll select maybe 80. And then for the debug type, we'll do for one frame, just so we see it. Then at the very out of this, we'll get a branch. And we want to break this result. And we're interested in the hit actor. So let's promote this to a variable, calling it our target actor. And we want to check, does this actor implement our interface? So does object implement interface? And we want to check for our BPI interaction. So let's say if it does, well then in that case, we'll promote it to this variable. And if it does, well then we are going to set it, but to nothing, like so. And let's also reroute this so we see this a little bit more cleanly. Okay. So just like this, we're almost done. Let's get our widget, a reference, and we'll do set message. And if you remember previously in the interaction, we created a lookat object or a lookat function. So we can grab this. And then from our interface, we just connect it like so. This will allow us to see the message for each item. Let's copy this and paste it into here like this. And might as well copy that and replace this guy like this. Okay. So this is our interaction trace done. Let's compile and save it. And on the event begin play, we want to call these events. So we want to call our interaction message. So it gets created at the very start. Then we want to create a custom event. Now you could run this on event tick if you wish, but I prefer to do a custom event and do begin interaction. And I don't like the capital N in there. So let's rename it again. Begin interaction. Okay. In here, we'll do a set timer by event. And this is up to you how quick you want this to run. I like it to be 0.2, and this runs very well. So we want this to also be looping. Then on the event, we'll do a custom event and we'll call it our update interaction. And that's okay. So with this, we then want to grab our capsule trace, and this event, or this function will run every 0.2 of a second. Let's then grab our begin interaction and plop it down on event begin play. So whoever owns this component, whoever the owner is, it's going to get this widget and it's going to get this trace. Let's compile that. And this would be a good idea to actually create our inputs. So we'll go to our third person character inputs and we'll create two. We'll create one for interacting with this object and one for inspecting it. So IA underscore interact, and we can duplicate this and call it IA underscore inspect. Save them, go into your IMC underscore default, and in here we want to create a new mapping for our interact, and we'll set this to be on the key E, and we'll create another mapping, and this will be for our inspect, and the key will be Q. With that done, we can save this. And let's add this component we just made to our player. So let's go to third person, blueprints character, and let's add our BPC underscore interaction. So now if we go to play, we should see a channel happening as we do. Perfect. So before we finish off with this, we can close our player character. There's nothing else we need to do in here, but in our interaction component, let's add those two inputs. So we'll do input, interact. We'll do input, inspect. Then in here, we want to check if this actor is valid. So let's convert it to a validated get. And if it is valid for the interact, we'll simply interact with it. So to interact with message. And for the player character, what we can do is in our content drawer, we can create a blueprint function library. And let's call this BP underscore universal library. So in here, we can have a function to get my player. And simply what we'll do is we'll get our player character. We'll cast to our third person character or your first person character, if that's what you're using. And we'll return this output here. And let's just call it our player character. And let's also make this function pure. Let's compile and save. So we can now access this function in any single blueprint we have. So in here, we'll do get my player. And there we go. Just like so. Then for here on the inspect, we want to do something similar. We also want to check if it's valid. We then want to inspect message like so. And don't worry about the inspect info just yet. And at the very end, we'll do a print string. So if we're interacting with it, we just want to know interacting. And if we're inspecting, we want to also know that we're just inspecting. Inspecting. We can also change the color from this to something like a pinkish color. Okay. Next, let's go ahead and create our data for our items. So in our interaction, we'll create a new folder and let's call this our item data. Let's also save this BPC_interaction component. So in our item data folder, we'll right click and create a structure for our items, s_item info. And in here, we'll add our 4 variables, which will be our item name. And of course, you can add as many as you wish. Just make sure they match on the ones you want to display in the inspect. Item name, item description. We want to know the item weight and the item value. So for the name, this was a text, same with the description, and for the weight, a float, and for the value, an integer. So with this complete, we can save that. And from this structure, let's create a data table. So go to miscellaneous, go to your data table, and we'll create a s_item info. Let's call this dt_item data, like so. So let's open this up, and in here we can add as many items as we want. So for the sake of this tutorial, I'll add 2. We'll have our first item. For the row name, this is like a special unique handle to get your item. So we'll do 00001A0, for example, something unique to find your item. And for the item name, we'll do test cube. For the description, we'll do this item is used for testing. The item weight can be 0.2 and the value will leave at 0. Then for our second item, we can do something like, 00001B0, for example. And for the name, we'll do mushroom. Then for the description, we'll do this mushroom, or let's do this item heals the player for 20 health points. This item heals the player for 20 health points. Okay. Item weight will do 0.2 and the value will do something like 25. So with your items done, we'll compile, save and exit. And let's go ahead and create another component. So go to blueprint class and let's go to actor component. We'll call this BPC_item data. So we can then add this component to our items and select which item they are. So go inside, go to variables, do item data for the name, and for the type, we'll do row handle. We'll get data table row handle. And let's compile and give this a default value of data table. Then in here for the row name, we'll leave it blank. But essentially, every time we add this to our item, we can select which item they are. So let's compile and save that. And let's go and create our item. So into interaction we go, and let's create a new folder, items. In here, we'll right click, do a blueprint class of type actor, and let's call this BP underscore item underscore base. So this will be the parent base for all of our items. In here, the first thing we want to do is add a static mesh. And this, let's call it to item mesh. And we'll also add a sphere collision to this. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I do. So sphere collision. As long as you're blocking the interactive trace channel, that's fine. So for the sphere collision, I'll do collision. And we'll do custom collision. You need to be blocking this interactive channel either on the item or the sphere collision, otherwise you won't be able to interact with it. So we're blocking it. Then for the items collision, what I'll do is I'll make this simulate physics. First I need to add a mesh to it, I guess. So a simple cube. I'll make it 0.5 actually, it's a bit big. And with that, then for the linear damping, I'll do 2, and same for the angular damping. I just found those values to be good. So let's do simulate physics as well. Then for the sphere collision, it's looking a little bit small. So what if I type in 100? That's a lot better. So let's drag this to the center, something like that. And with this done, let's also add our interaction. So BPI underscore interaction. And let's go to inspect, or let's go to look at. Look out, I called it. Probably should be called look at. So BPI interaction. Let's do look at, not look out. Compile that. And in our item again, we want to get our data component. So let's add it in, BPC underscore item data. And in here, we can decide which item this is. Since this is the parent class, I'll make this the first item, 1A0. We can get this and do get item data. From here, we can do a break. And from this row name, we'll do get row, and we'll get our get data table row. Connect that like so. And bring that into here. Give ourselves some space, and let's look nice. Then out row, if this is found, we'll do a break. And that's not the one we want actually. If this is found, we're interested in our item info. And in here, we have access to our name, description, and all these goods. So we'll plug in the message there, but before we even do that, this would just output the name. I want to do a format. So we are saying pick up space, curly brackets, the item, close curly brackets. So it's going to say pick up first and then the item. So you can see that if we had a door, we could say open first or open close, depending if it's opened, then the actual door name or whatever it may be. So that's for our look at. Let's compile and save that. Next, we can go ahead and do our inspect. So let's double click on that. And in here, we also want access to our data table row. So let's go to our look at. We can actually steal this part, Control C, and Control V to paste it. And let's connect this in here. So if this row is found, we want to spawn in the actor we're going to be inspecting. So in order to do that, we first need to create it. So let's go to our content drawer, inspect, right click, and let's create a blueprint class actor, calling it our BP underscore inspect underscore base. Let's open this up and let's add into it our BPI interface, interaction, compile and save, and we can exit for now. So row found, we'll do spawn actor from class, and this is going to be our BP underscore inspect base. Now for the spawn transform, you just want to spawn it somewhere away from you so it's not close. So for this, I'll do 10 numbers. I'll do 1, 0, 0, 0. So that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Something like this. So it's far away from you. Then out the return value, what we'll do is we'll do inspect. And we're going to call this function inspect. Or perhaps not even that. Inspect. We want to call this interaction, like so. So the pin is yellowish. Now from here, we'll do a make inspect info, and we can add in our item mesh, our item materials, and so on. So let's grab our item mesh and do get static mesh like that. And we'll connect it into here. Okay. For the item materials, we'll just drag off here and do get materials. And like if I mentioned previously, your item could just have the one material, but some items could have multiple. So it's just good to make this an array. If it's one, it'll be good anyways. So that goes into our inspector. Then we have 4 more things to do: the item name, description, weight, and so on. So from here, we can plug all of these values in there: item name, description, the weight, and the value. Let's just rewrite the spin to make it a lot neater. And we can stretch this out a little bit. Okay. So with this done, we can actually add our interact with as well, but this won't really do anything. If you wanted to print a text or something, you can, but we're interested in the inspect. So in here, if you had an inventory, you could destroy the actor on pickup, let's say. Okay, so with this done, let's compile and save. Next, what we could do is we could change the pivot's location on our parent. In here, as you can see at the moment, it's on the very bottom. So to change it, we go to our game and we drag this actor into our world. If we go to our modeling option, we go to Xform and do edit pivot, we can now change it from the bottom to center like so. If you hit accept, this should change it for all of this type of mesh. So let's delete it and add it back in. And as we can see, it wants to be in here because that's the middle point. Control save this and let's open this. And we can see now that the location has changed to middle. So let's also bring this down to middle like so. Okay, so let's compile and save that. So this is it for the first part. In the second part, we'll go ahead and finish off our inspect system. With that said, I hope you enjoyed. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike. And as always, happy developing.